Good morning. We invite all of you to have a seat, please. Director, please, we're waiting for you. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to me to start to open fires in this 11th Open Science Conference in Pucón, Chile. First of all, I want to say that with us is today the Minister Alberto Van Claveren Stork, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile, Ms. Carolina Gainza Cortez, Undersecretary for Science, Technology, Knowledge and Innovation, Mr. Carlos Barra Matamala, the Mayor of Pucón, welcome, Mr. Germán Vergara Lagos, Mayor of Villarrica, Dr. Gino Casasa, Director of the Chilean Antarctic Institute, Dr. Jefferson Simoes, SCAR Vice President for Finances, Dr. Deneb Karens, SCAR Vice President for Science, Dr. Antonio Quesada, President of COPNAP, the Council of Managers of National Antarctic Programs, Mrs. Michelle Rogan-Finamore, Executive Secretary of COPNAP, Veronica Vallejos Marchant, Regional Ministerial Secretary of Science, Technology, Knowledge and Innovation, and Mr. Rodrigo Garrido Maldonado, Director of Pucón Branch of the University of La Frontera. Also, dear sponsors and representatives of organizing and supporting institutions. But I don't forget the president of SCAR, Mr. Jedon King. Distinguished scientists from all the corners of the world, welcome to all Antarctic scientists attending to the 11th SCAR Open Science Conference in Pucón, Chile. It is an honor to welcome such a distinguished community of researchers and experts to this beautiful corner of the world. Pucón, with the majestic Villarrica volcano, or Rucapillán, as it's known to our native people. And its breathtaking landscapes becomes the perfect setting for this meeting that promises to be melting pot of innovative ideas and fruitful collaborations. To begin this ceremony, I would like to invite Mr. Jedon King, President of SCAR, to this stage to officially open the 11th SCAR Open Science Conference.
Thank you, Marcelo. Dear colleagues and distinguished guests, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depends on where you are. It's really my privilege and honor to welcome you, all of you, to the 2024 SCAR Open Science Conference here in the beautiful town of Pucón in Chile. This gathering is particularly special because it marks SCAR's first in-person Open Science Conference since 2018 after pandemic. I know many of us have been eager and looking forward to this conference, and it's so wonderful to get together again with colleagues and old friends finally. First, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our distinguished guest. First, President Gabriel Boric of Chile, who will kindly deliver a welcome message through a video recording after this. And Dr. Peter Krugman, the President of International Science Council, also deliver a video message after me. And I especially thank you, Dr. Alberto Claveron, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Republic of Chile, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And the Secretary of Carolina Cortez of the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Knowledge and Information, Antonio Cuesta, the COMNET President, and all the other very important guests. I welcome you all to this SCA Open Science Conference. The SCA Open Science Conference is more than just a meeting. This is the world leading event for Antarctic science. Every 2 years, this conference brings together researchers from around the globe to share the latest findings, spark new ideas, and work together to better understand the Antarctic and Southern Ocean. This is a place where our collective knowledge grows and where we find a new way to protect one of the most important and delicate regions on Earth. Hosting this year's conference in Chile is especially meaningful. Chile has been deeply involved in Antarctic research since SCA was born in 1958. The fact that we are a bit close to the Antarctic here in Pucón is a powerful reminder of our connection to the remote icy continent. Chile's commitment to Antarctic science is clear, and it's the timely that we gather here to continue our important work. As you may know, we have already looked through a schedule. We have an extensive number of programs this week. SCA, as an international science organization facilitating Antarctic science, have more than 50 groups in various disciplines studying the remote continent. SCA's flagship scientific research program are driving forward research that helps us understand and address critical issues like climate change, ecosystem, and glaciology. The work being done through this program is vital, and I encourage every one of you here to engage with these groups and scientific research program and other groups within SCA's throughout this conference. I am particularly excited to see so many young career scientists with us today. This conference offers a unique chance for you to share your work, connect with seasoned experts, and get valuable feedback. It's also a chance to build lasting collaborations and become a part of international community dedicated to Antarctic research. You are the future of this field, and your contribution are essential. As we begin this week of presentation discussion, let's keep in mind the big picture. The work we do here not only advance Antarctic science, but also help us understand the broader environmental change affecting our globe. Together, we are making a difference, and our effort will have lasting impact. Lastly, obviously not the least, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Professor Sharon Robinson and Francisco Herbe, International Science Organizing Committee chairs, Dr. Marcelo Lepe, presenting a local organizing committee, SCA Secretariat, and all the supporters and volunteers who have placed tremendous effort to make this conference possible. Again, thank you all for being here in person or online, for your commitment to Antarctic work, and for your dedication to this vital work. Let's make this 2024 Open Science Conference a memorable and impactful event. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, Yedon. To continue, we have the greetings of Sir Peter Gluckman, President of the International Science Council. He sent a video for us.
I'm Peter Gluckman, President of the International Science Council, and I'm speaking to you today from Auckland in New Zealand. And it really is an honour to address the global scientific community on behalf of the International Science Council at the opening of the 11th Open Science Conference of SCAR. It's a meeting I once attended many years ago, and I wish I could be with you today. As a founding organisation of SCAR, it's been a great privilege for the International Science Council and its predecessor, ICSU, to witness the 7 decades of success by SCAR in advancing critical international research, cooperation, and education on the Antarctic region, the Southern Ocean, and the role of the Antarctic region in the Earth system. Something that you could not underestimate the importance of at the present time. SCAR's role in providing independent scientific advice to the parties to the Antarctic Treaty, to UNFCCC and the IPCC, and equipping decision makers both globally and in individual countries with the information they need to understand what is happening to the global environment, to sea level rise, to melting ice, to climate risk management, to the changes in ocean currents, changes in the weather system, the global impacts of changes and vulnerabilities in the Antarctic region has been critical. And the global community has to continue to work together to develop effective knowledge, transfer that knowledge through brokerage to the policy community, and importantly, to encourage global action on the critical issues that you're discovering and identifying. With the growing societal risks from sea current change, from sea level rise, from increased activities in the Antarctic, the biodiversity compromises to a vulnerable ecosystem, and the urgency of the need to address solutions to the environmental challenges that are globally seen and have much of their origin in the Antarctic region, the expertise of your community and its wisdom and its collective efforts will be fundamental for securing a sustainable future for all of us. The Antarctic Treaty followed the International Geophysical Year of 1957 and remains the epitome of good international scientific cooperation and diplomacy. And that's more important than ever in a period of heightened geopolitical tensions. It's through your collective efforts of scientists and researchers that SCAR not only fills knowledge gaps, but demonstrates how peaceful international cooperation can transcend geopolitical borders, and that the preservation of the planet remains well and far more important than just political discord. The International Science Council has been going through a period of rebuilding and restructuring, and the role of its affiliate bodies, such as SCAR, are more and more critical. And we look forward to much more closer relationships with SCAR in coming years than we've had perhaps in recent times. In particular, we work together and much involved together in thinking about the next International Polar Year in 2032-2033. That is a critical event because not only does the Antarctic demonstrate what can be achieved through international scientific cooperation, but we must be realistic and recognise that the other poles have other issues in play, where again, the demonstration of what can be achieved in the Antarctic through your kind of efforts together should be able to be achieved elsewhere. I wish it could. I'm confident that SCAR remains one of the most important demonstrations that international scientific cooperation is the way ahead to protect the planet and get beyond differences that exist between countries. I congratulate SCAR on its many decades of remarkable work. I wish I was with you, and I wish you a successful conference, fruitful deliberations, and a joining together to advance our understanding of this critical part of our vulnerable planet.
Thank you very much, Sir Peter Glackman, President of the International Science Council. We now leave with you the greetings of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Chile, Mr. Gabriel Boric Font, who wanted to share with you a special message.
Como ustedes saben, Chile es la puerta de entrada al mundo, a la Antártica, y tenemos una vocación antártica que ya lleva mucho tiempo, es una política de Estado en nuestro país. Hace solo unos meses, de hecho, junto al secretario general de Naciones Unidas, Antonio Guterres, visitamos el continente blanco, donde constatamos el aporte científico y logístico de Chile a equipos de investigadores e investigadoras provenientes de todo el mundo, pero donde además Antonio tuvo, desde mi perspectiva, la lucidez de advertir de las consecuencias de la crisis climática desde este lugar tan importante para todo el mundo, que es la Antártica. Este año, además, con la incorporación del buque Almirante Biel a la Armada de Chile, dimos un gran paso en el esfuerzo de mantener a la Antártica como un continente de ciencia y de paz. Es el rompehielo más grande y moderno construido en nuestro propio país, un laboratorio flotante que es un tremendo logro para Chile y una gran noticia para la comunidad científica en su conjunto. Hoy, para mí como Presidente de la República, es un honor recibir en nuestro país a la reunión bienal del Comité Científico para la Investigación Antártica, que puede ser considerada como la mayor reunión científica antártica de la historia. Y se los digo especialmente habiendo sido parlamentario por la región de Magallanes y la Antártica chilena por 8 años y teniendo una relación cercana con el continente blanco. Este encuentro ocurre en un momento clave de la humanidad, con concentraciones de dióxido de carbono superiores a la que cualquier otro representante de nuestra especie haya experimentado en sus 350.000 años sobre la faz de la Tierra. Por eso es un orgullo ver a la comunidad científica unida, trabajando para enfrentar la crisis climática. Es un deber de cada uno de los estados trabajar de la misma forma para poder llevar adelante políticas públicas que sean responsables y basadas en la evidencia, y además no permitir que se violen los principios del Tratado Antártico, por ejemplo, con la exploración o eventual explotación de minerales en el continente blanco. Muchísimo éxito en este encuentro y muchas gracias por venir a nuestro país. Sean todos muy bienvenidos. Un abrazo grande.
Gobierno de Chile. Chile avanza contigo.
Maybe we can take 20 seconds. We invite all the people in the back part to fill the gaps. We have a lot of gaps in the first 8 lines. Please, don't be shy. Thank you. Now, following with this opening ceremony, it is fitting to invite to this stage the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile, Mr. Alberto Van Claveren Stork, who will address us. Minister?
Muy buenos días a todas y todos. Good morning. Special greetings to the chair of SCAR, Dr. Kim, and to the vice chairs of Turquía, the United States, Brazil, and Chile. Un saludo especial para la subsecretaria de Ciencias, Carolina Gainza, para el alcalde de Pucón, don Carlos Barra, para el director del Instituto Nacional Antártico de Chile, el doctor Gino Casasa, para el presidente del grupo organizador de este gran encuentro, el doctor Marcelo Lepe, para el director del campus de la Universidad de la Frontera, contiguo a este hotel, para las secretarias regionales ministeriales, las Ceremis, Verónica Vallejos y Maite Castro, para todas y todos los académicos, representantes de la sociedad civil, organizaciones no gubernamentales que nos acompañan. Dear scientists, academics, and special guests, at the Antarctic meeting of the International Council of Scientific Unions, ICSU, in Stockholm, during September 1957, it was agreed to create a committee to oversee scientific research in the Antarctic. At that time, 12 nations, including Chile, were actively conducting Antarctic research. Chile appointed a delegate to join the Special Committee on Antarctic Research, which held its first meeting in The Hague, in the Netherlands, in February 1958, marking the beginning of SCAR. As a founding member, Chile has supported SCAR's efforts to incorporate science into the political and administrative decisions nations make regarding the Antarctic. When the opportunity arose to host the 11th SCAR Open Science Conference, business meetings, and the SCAR Delegates Meeting, Chile seized it, recognizing its destiny is intertwined with Antarctica's future. Antarctica is now considered the planet-beating heart, surrounded by the powerful Antarctic circumpolar current, which interacts with nearly all the world's seas, regulating processes in distant regions. The atmosphere over Antarctica also interacts unexpectedly with regions such as Southeast Asia, the Equatorial Pacific, and other vast tropical areas. As the UN Secretary General aptly said during his recent visit with President Boric to the White Continent, what happens in Antarctica doesn't stay in the Antarctica. Since the advent of instrumental recording, significant climate change have been observed in the area. These include atmospheric and oceanic warming, thinning of the continental ice sheet, and sea ice anomalies. While these changes, which show strong zonal asymmetry, are partly influenced by greenhouse gas emissions and stratospheric ozone depletion, tropical polar teleconnections play a more significant role than initially thought. The 2014 SCAR Horizon Scan highlighted the need to address the gap due to limited observations and inherent model biases. Long-term observations and improved climate models offer opportunities to reduce these uncertainties. Chile has responded by deploying a new network of automatic stations and autonomous sensors through the Chilean Antarctic Institute, INACH, transmitting data in real time over a distance of 2,100 kilometers, about 1,300 miles. Likewise, the new icebreaker Oscalviel, built in Chile for high-quality scientific research in the Southern Ocean, and the planned renovation of the Carvajal base within the polar circle will further deepen studies in regions actively evolving due to climate change. There is no doubt that our mountain ice, southern ice fields, and Antarctic ice fields are changing. The high latitudes, including polar and subpolar regions, are experiencing the effects of global warming with increasing intensity. Greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide, have reached record levels, while the planet is experiencing average temperatures unprecedented in human history. The Earth's temperature has raised to a point where crucial features like eternal ice may no longer recover. Species intolerant of change are retreating inland from Antarctica, while those tolerant are beginning to compete with invasive species from other latitudes. These changes are impacting ecosystems and humans, threatening the livelihoods of millions and will worsen as global warming progresses. The last decade of Antarctic research has shown that Antarctic Peninsula experienced new episodes of extreme heat and record surface melt in summers, especially in the last 3 years. Intense atmospheric rivers have brought anomalous heat and precipitation, while the intensification of the Föhn effect has led to increased temperatures northeast of the Antarctic Peninsula, causing record sea ice loss and violent weather episodes outside Antarctica, such as the recent intense precipitation in southern Brazil. Given that the polar regions and high latitudes are experiencing the most intense changes predicted by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, and that Antarctica and its surrounding ocean are now recognized as crucial players in all IPCC scenarios, the Chile 2024 SCAR Open Science Conference will be key to bring available global science to the forefront. After 6 years without face-to-face Antarctic conference, over 1,000 Antarctic scientists from 55 nationalities are gathering here in Pucón, a city surrounded by forest, wildlife, volcanoes, and lakes that recall Antarctica's distant past. We welcome you to Chile and this historic gathering of Antarctic science. Enjoy your stay and much success in your discussions. Thank you very much for your attendance. Muchas gracias a todas y todos.
Thank you very much, Minister. Over the next days, you will have the opportunity to share your discoveries, discuss about the challenges and opportunities facing Antarctic science, and forge new partnerships that will undoubtedly advance knowledge and conversation of this unique continent. I would now like to give you some important background information for this conference. On the back of your badge here, you will find a QR code to access the conference app with the latest information about SCAR Open Science Conference, as well as indications just in case of medical emergencies, volcanic emergencies, and all other kind of emergencies. Yeah, I know some of you want to see the lights, but you will also find details of standalone events, mini symposiums, workshops, plenary, and parallel sessions, as well as the Antarctic Fest activities on Wednesday 21st, which includes an exhibition of Antarctic-inspired crafts that will be in the other side of the main square. Talks, documentaries, a film festival, among other activities. Also, tickets for the Antarctic party on the night of Friday will be available from today. Yes. We also invite those who have not done during the Saturday and Sunday, use the lunch time to install your posters, please. Lunch time is important. After this room will be closed. Don't forget that those who cannot upload the PowerPoint to the platform, you can upload it physically to the computers in the registration area from 18 hours to 19 hours, and maybe later, each day before the day of your presentation. And don't forget to register to the event IPY, International Polar Year 2032-33, From Vision to Action, on the conference website. I don't want to overwhelm you with more information. You can find it with the application. And I would like to leave you, the distinguished Australian researcher, Dr. Sharon Robinson, co-chair of the ISOC, together with the outstanding Chilean researcher, Dr. Francisco Hervé, who wasn't able to attend due to the health problems, and to whom we wish a speed recovery. Without further ado, I want to invite Dr. Sharon Robinson, will present the first SCAR lecture of the conference.
Hola, buenos dias. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you, Marcelo, and all of your colleagues for bringing us to this beautiful region of Chile for our first in-person SCAR, Open SCAR, for 6 years. I'm particularly impressed that we're in such an amazing, stunning location. I'm always in awe of those beautiful mountains that we often fly past if we're coming to Punta Arenas from Santiago, and it's a great pleasure to actually be here in this very special place. I'd also like to thank the members of the International Organizing Committee who are here today, and also to thank my co-chair, Dr. Francisco Hervé, for all their efforts in creating the impressive program that we have ahead of us this week. I'm sure we're going to enjoy a week of outstanding Antarctic science, and I look forward to hearing about everyone's work that they've been doing over the last few years. I especially welcome all those people for whom it's your first Open SCAR. So I can remember my first one, but it's very special if this is your first meeting where you've actually come and you're meeting with all your colleagues. So welcome if it's your first meeting, and a special welcome to all our early career researchers. The thing I love best about an open science meeting is that we get the chance to interact and listen to experts from all the different disciplines that make up Antarctic science. So it's really one of those only chances where you get to go to sessions on biology or glaciology or marine biology. All the different sciences are here this week. So don't limit yourself. Go and listen to talks outside of your area and learn more about Antarctica and how special it is. It's also important, given the location we're in, and many of the speakers, including the minister, spoke to us about this, we can see how Antarctica is changing because of climate change. And as he said, these mountains that are all around us are being affected by climate warming, and it's really important that we use our voices as scientists to explain to everyone that it's really important that we take action on climate change. So I take great pleasure this morning, though, in introducing our first plenary speaker. And Sally is actually going to be a great example of how the open science meetings are interdisciplinary. She's going to tell us about how marine biology and what happens on the floor of the sea, what that tells us about the Antarctic ice sheets. So how biology can help us to understand the history of the Antarctic ice sheets. Sally is a postdoctoral researcher from Securing Antarctica's Environmental Future at James Cook University in Australia. So she's come a long way to be here today. Her work focuses on investigating the evolutionary histories of Southern Ocean marine invertebrates using genetic methods and applying those knowledges in the context of climate changes in the past. Sally is an early career researcher. She recently completed her PhD in evolutionary genetics at James Cook University only in 2022 and was a recipient of the 2022 SCAR Instant Fellowship. You're probably aware of a recent paper that Sally published in Science, which is the work that she's going to talk to us about today. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Sally to give us this first plenary lecture of Open SCAR 2024, and she's going to talk about learning from the persistence of Southern Ocean benthic invertebrates. Thank you, Sally.
Hello everyone, I'm Sally Lau and I'm really honoured to be allowed to be presenting some of my work as a very early career researcher in this morning's lecture. I hope I don't disappoint you. So I'll tell you a little bit about marine invertebrates because I think this is supposed to be a geology session. But first, let me walk you through what inspired this talk. First is the organism themselves, and second is how you can apply their evolutionary history to answer a long-standing geoscience question. And lastly is the power of interdisciplinary science, which I can summarize the journey as a lot of patience and a lot of sweat. So when we think about the Southern Ocean ecosystem and the biodiversity within it, very often we can imagine it like being a food web, where we'll probably first think about seeing penguins, seals, whales, krill and fish, and typically marine invertebrates, so the critters that live at the bottom of the seafloor, they get lumped together as a single unit at the bottom. But in reality, of the 8,400 marine species that are currently living in the Southern Ocean, around 78% of them are actually represented by benthic invertebrates. And they should really be a lot bigger in this photo if we measure everything just by species richness. And today, the benthic invertebrate communities in the Southern Ocean, they're really rich and diverse, ranging from sponges, corals, tube worms, to other species like sea stars, urchins, amphipods, and octopus. I might be biased, but these animals are pretty awesome. They possess really interesting characters that make them very special from other parts of the world. And in some animal, we see circumantarctic distribution, like this octopus, Paralene tiketi. But some other animals also show regional endemism. So, for example, like this sponge is only found in South Georgia. Sometimes we also see animals that can be found in extensive depth ranges, like this sea spider that can be found from 0 to 4,000 meters deep. And sometimes we also see animals that look identical to each other, but it turns out to be more than 59 species for the case of the sea slug. And of course, not animals have all these traits together. Some may possess one or more of these features, but all these characters all together just make them very distinct from other parts of the world, which really warrants their special protection. And how they become the animals they are today that is quite tightly linked to their long-term survival in the Southern Ocean throughout geological periods, which I like to call it evolutionary persistence. It's been well discussed in the literature that many events during the Cenozoic have shaped the diversification of these modern species. So this is a timeline of the global temperature throughout the Cenozoic, including today. And one of the early drivers of invertebrate diversification in the Southern Ocean is the mid-Miocene transition at around 14 million years ago. This is when the Antarctic circumpolar current intensified alongside the major expansion of the east and the west Antarctic ice sheet. And this is where we get the sense that Southern Ocean marine vertebrates are beginning to be trapped by the intensified Antarctic circumpolar current, and they become isolated from other parts of the world. And another major driving force of evolution is the more recent interglacial and glacial periods throughout the Pliocene and Pleistocene. And many of the modern benthic invertebrate species that we see today, they actually survive through repeated Antarctic ice sheet expansion and contraction during these periods. And if we zoom into this red box, and we look at the simulated total Antarctic ice volume in the last 5 million years until now, we can clearly get an idea that the benthic ecosystem had experienced massive disturbance repeatedly throughout these interglacial and glacial cycles. And each cycle was a massive, big natural climate exchange to them. Each reduction in ice volume is the Antarctic ice sheet mass loss during an interglacial period, which means more habitat became available for animals to colonize and breed. And on the opposite end of the graph, each increase in ice volume is the Antarctic ice sheet expansion during a glacial period, which means less habitat were available for animals to breed and survive. So as we can see from here, things get pretty intense for our marine vertebrates in the last 1 million years. So from the geological record, we already know that Antarctic ice sheet expansion, like during the last glacial maximum at around 12,000 years ago, the Antarctic ice sheet expanded and extended almost to the edge of the continental shelf. And if we look at this glacial extent from a cross-section point of view, we can see that most of the habitats on the shelf were destroyed by the grounded ice sheet, and many of the animals that lived at the bottom of the shelf were presumed to be extinct. But we know that Antarctic shelf fauna did survive during these glacial cycles because there's so many of them today. So there have been long-standing hypotheses that have been put forward since 1969 and throughout the early 2000s, proposing that benthic invertebrates would have had to survive in situ ice-free refugia on the shelf, or near the shelf edge, or in deep water refugia, or in sub-Antarctic island refugia during these glacial cycles. And fast forward to 2012, studies began to analyze the genetic data of present-day feather stars, sea spiders, octopus, urchins, brittle stars, and so on. And we do find that information recorded in their DNA do support all these refugia hypotheses. So in these earlier studies integrating biology and geology together, looking at animal survival during the last glacial maximum, we can already establish that the DNA of modern animals contain information about how their ancestors survived in geological periods in the past. So by extending this concept, we can apply animal genetics as a proxy to reconstruct the historic Antarctic ice sheet configurations. And not just the last glacial maximum, but perhaps in earlier geological periods, maybe like the last interglacial period, just before the last glacial maximum. So this brings me to a case study that I did during my PhD, which I looked into applying animal genetics to help reconstruct the past Antarctic ice sheet configuration. It was a PhD project, but the credit should really go to John Strongnow and Nerda Wilson, who led and worked very hard to conceptually expand this idea in a 2018 paper using genomics, and then turning this idea into a reality in terms of getting funding and also bringing in collaborations from various disciplines that offered knowledge, skills, and samples to make this happen. And the reason why we care about the Antarctic's past is because all the Antarctic ice sheets together contains enough water to raise global sea level by 58 meters. And in particular, we should think about the West Antarctic ice sheet because it lies below sea level, directly influenced by ocean warming, making it sensitive to temperature changes. And it has the potential to raise global sea level by up to 5 meters. And just between 2017 and 2020, on average, the West Antarctic ice sheet has lost around 94 gigatons of ice per year. So this is a graph showing how much ice each of the different Antarctic ice sheet and Greenland are losing over the years since 1992. The y-axis on the right is the sea level contribution. The green line is the West Antarctic ice sheet, and the light purple line is the entire Antarctica. So as you can see, West Antarctic ice sheet is really driving the whole pattern of ice loss in Antarctica up until now. And it would be great if we can predict at what stage are we going to reach the tipping point for West Antarctic ice sheet collapse. And it's hard to understand the tipping point for waste collapse because we need to melt the ice sheet to see how it behaves. But there are other ways we can understand this instability too, which is from looking at how it behaved in the past. So right now, at present day, the temperature and CO2 levels are really high because of our emissions. But there were super interglacial periods in the past, like the last interglacial period, marine isotope stage 5e, that also have temperature and CO2 level similar or even higher than pre-industrial times. But the sea level was 5 meters even higher than today. And we know that waves collapsed during the mid-Pliocene. And if we can figure out if waves also collapse in the really recent past, like the last interglacial period, 125,000 years ago, then we can really constrain our knowledge about temperature threshold for waves collapse and applying that to our future climate scenarios. And we can use animal genetics to test for waves collapse because their ancestors would have survived around it and how they experienced it would have been recorded in the genomes of their modern day descendants. So there are 3 possible simple configurations of waves during the last interglacial. The first scenario is that there will be no collapse, just melt it a little bit. So from a population genetics point of view, the benthic populations in the Weddell, Amazon, and Ross Seas would be isolated in their own basins by the actual ice sheet. The second scenario is that there will be a partial collapse where the animals could travel through a trans-West Antarctic seaway directly connecting the Weddell and Amazon Sea, and they can directly breed with each other. In the last scenario, there will be a complete collapse, where animals will be connected by seaways directly between the Weddell, Amazon, and Ross Sea, and they could breed and exchange genetic materials directly with each other. And we actually can't test for this question without incorporating samples from East Antarctica, because it allows us to rule out whether the no collapse scenario is true and whether they could just interbreed around the circumference of the continent via the East Antarctic all this time. And for a long time, finding East Antarctic samples was the technical bottleneck in testing this question because it's extremely difficult to get any biological samples from this region. But we didn't dream about this solution one day. For 20 years, biologists knew that species assemblage and genetic data carry these waste collapse signatures. So for species assemblage data, it was found that there was a signature of distinct biological connection between the Weddell, Amazon, Ross Sea, but there isn't enough power to date this connection this way. For genetic data, many of the data sets were of low resolution, so not genomic data, or that they didn't have samples from East Antarctica, so that rules out the top 4. So this leaves us with the octopus Paralanitiketi as the candidate to test for waste collapse. So there are some good samples from East Antarctica. Back in 2012, we only analyzed microsatellite data, which is low-resolution, simple DNA sequences. We can't date any migration pattern this way. Ideally, we would love to use genomics, which is looking at DNA distributed across the whole genome, which gives us high-resolution data to utilize the most up-to-date, sophisticated genomic approaches. Of course, back in 2012, it wasn't remotely possible to sequence genomic data from marine invertebrates. But technologies have really improved since then, and we can do genomics on octopus right now. So we revisited this question using this species in 2018 again. And you might think, really? Octopus? So from earlier genetic studies focusing on lower resolution genetic markers, we already know that this species has been hanging out in the Southern Ocean for a few million years. So this is the phylogenetic tree, and we know that there are two lineages in this species. So the subantarctic lineage and the Antarctic continental shelf lineage, and they were split at around 4 million years ago. And for this octopus, the mother breeds the eggs, and the hatchlings and the adult, they just crawl on the seafloor. And it's not a really picky eater either. You can find this octopus does like to prefer to eat tiny shrimps and tiny worms, but they eat almost everything, like eggs and other octopuses. And we know that this species is only found exclusively on the Antarctic continental shelf, and previous genetic data do show that they survived in situ shelf refugia during the last glacial maximum. And from this, their ancestors has experienced the Pliocene and Pleistocene interglacial and glacial cycles that we care about. And it doesn't swim too much, which means it doesn't randomly mate with anyone across the Southern Ocean, which means there's a better chance that historical signatures are retained in the genomes of their today's descendants. And more importantly, we can see that this species history is bounded to the Antarctic continental shelf only. So from a biological point of view, Paralineticeti, this species, is quite a good candidate to test for waste collapse hypotheses. So given this Antarctic octopus has a circumpolar distribution, for over 32 years, we've gathered 96 octopus samples from all around Antarctica that were high quality enough for genomics. We first looked into its population structure, and we found that this species has 7 genetic clusters across the Southern Ocean. On a map here, we have a graph of their population structure being chopped up and presented spatially. Each bar here is a single sample. Each color is a genetic cluster. If there's more than one color is in a single sample, then it means that this sample is admixed and it has the ancestry of multiple genetic clusters. Because not all the locations have the same color, which means that this species is biogeographically structured, which is a really good thing because it does confirm that this animal doesn't swim and mix together around Antarctica far too much, and we can move forward to test for the waste collapse hypothesis using genomics. So how can we use modern DNA to look at events in the past? We can imagine DNA is like a scarf that records family history, and everyone's and every animal's DNA is passed on from parents to children, and then the children's family history is then knitted onto the DNA. And DNA makes mistakes when it replicates, and these mistakes, or substitutions, they are recorded in this DNA scarf, which is also passed on from parents to children. So as a result, the DNA of anything alive today contains information about their ancestors' past. So just for $129 US, if I give my DNA to 23andMe, they can use the mistakes recorded in my own DNA to tell me who and where my ancestors were thousands of years ago. We can efficiently summarize these genome-wide mistakes in the form of a spectrum, which we call the site frequency spectrum. So let's say we have a population of 3 individuals, and we look at the first 6 bases of their DNA, and we compare these 6 bases to an outgrouped species sequence, which could be a closely related species, to determine whether the base in it is an original copy or if it's a mistake. So in the first and second bases here, we don't see a mutation, so we record 2 counts of serial-derived allele frequency. But in the third base, we see a mutation in individual 2, so we record 1 count of derived allele frequency. And across many, many bases, beyond these 6 bases, we eventually build a spectrum of something like this. And the shape of this spectrum is really powerful. It can tell us a lot about population history. So for example, if a population had experienced a constant population size, then we expect to see a spectrum looking something like this. But if the population had experienced a bottleneck or expansion or structured populations, then we expect to see different shapes of this spectrum relative to the constant. And we can scale up from one population and compare the site frequency spectrums between 2 populations, and this is called the 2-dimensional site frequency spectrum. We can even introduce more populations. So here we are looking at population A, B, and C, and how their spectrums interact with each other. Here I'm actually showing you the real genetic data comparing human DNA patterns. And we test a simple model about human expansion out of Africa. In this model, the gray bar represents the ancestral populations of all the humans. Each green bar here represents one modern population. The size of the bar represents population size, and arrows represent migration. And based on how we define the models, we can simulate how the spectrums should look like. And in here, since the simulated spectrum agree with the real data, we can say that this model is indeed a best model that explains the real human DNA patterns. And because we know the mutation rate for human DNA, we can use these mistakes recorded in the DNA to date the timings of these migrations and population split. And with these kind of modeling and approaches, this is how we come to understand human migration out of Africa by literally doing a lot of 23andMe, comparing DNA patterns around the world. And for the octopus, I applied the same method, and I tested 17 main models involving different waste collapse hypotheses while thinking about their population size changes and connectivity with each other over time, also accounting for their circumpolar movement around the coast. I included populations from the Weddell, Amundsen, and the Ross Sea, and also East Antarctica. And all these models here can be boiled down to 3 hypotheses: no, partial, or complete collapse. And through this approach, we are able to tell which one of these contrasting scenarios explains the octopus genetics patterns the best. These took a few years to run on a few supercomputers. Some models are better fitted to the real genetic data than the others, and we can compare all their fit together statistically. So this is the violin plot of the Akeke information criterion fit of each of the model to the real genetic data. Each violin and the box plot inside it represent the variation in the AIC fit across replicate. And this one, which represents a complete collapse, being the best fitted amongst all the models. And if we visualize this best model on a tree, the size of the bar are proportional to the size of the population. The arrows represent migration. The lines on the side represent the time interval. The bracket underneath represents a 95% confidence interval. So we found that historical migration associated via the Trans-West Antarctic seaways connecting Weddell, Amundsen, Ross Seas began around 3 million years ago, which corresponds to the historical waste collapses in the mid-Pliocene that was already known from geological records. Then the signatures of seaway migration was last detected at around 87,000 years ago, which, considering for the confidence interval here, this can only be linked back to the last interglacial. And of course, there should be other seaway openings and closures between the Pliocene and the last interglacial. But our models here actually quite simple and were specifically designed to identify when was the last time there was migration via the Trans-West Antarctic seaways, which in the octopus genomes, it was shown that it was just ended after the last interglacial and not in earlier geological period. And since the seaway closed up after last interglacial, we detected migration patterns around the Antarctic coast going in both directions until the present day. So through the octopus DNA, we found that the last time waves collapsed was during the last interglacial, which was the last time global temperatures were 0.5 to 1.5 degrees higher than pre-industrial times. And in the last 12 months, we managed to smash our warming record. We're now averaging 1.5 above pre-industrial. But if the trouble is, if there's anything we can learn from what happened during the last interglacial, is that sustained global warming above 1.5 could result in an unstoppable collapse of waves. And once we reach the tipping point for waves collapse, the melting becomes self-reinforcing, and therefore it becomes unstoppable. And right now, today, around 717 million people live on land less than 5 meters above sea level. This is 10% of the global population, which is 57 times more people than the entire Syrian refugee crisis so far. Just think about the societal implication from Antarctica because of global warming coming from an octopus. But what I really want to talk about today is that even though this octopus study may be considered as a successful interdisciplinary study, it's built on the hard work and aspiration of many people over 45 years. I think it's safe to say that John Mercer, who published a seminal paper in Nature, he was the first person who raised the alarm bell that waves may be inherently unstable under a warm climate, including the current climate change and the last interglacial. Then I did a deep dive on the internet, and I found that the first ever proposal of marine animal crossing the Trans-West Antarctic seaways was proposed by a geologist in a technical paper in 1979. Then it was 10 years later, the concept of Trans-West Antarctic seaways was integrated as part of the evolutionary processes of Southern Ocean marine fauna. Our project started collecting octopus samples for our paper in 1919 and all the way up to 2016. And during this time, there was extensive taxonomic studies on the octopus genus that really solidified the species status of Paraleni teceti. There's also a lot of important papers published between 1997 and 2012 that really dived into the genetic patterns of Paraleni teceti and its biology, reproduction, and phylogenetics. And only with these information, this is when we are able to begin to tease apart the signal of historic waste collapse. And don't forget, we should really acknowledge that there was a lot of foundational effort done on analyzing other invertebrates that try to find signatures of waste collapse using biology. And arguably, these efforts of understanding Antarctic marine life was really boosted by the last International Polar Year and the census of Antarctic marine life in 2008. It was only until 2016 the sequencing technology we use in our paper was developed. So this allows us to think about how to use the latest genomic technique to sequence existing samples collected since the 1990s to really isolate these waste collapse signature as seen in biology for years. We then follow through what we proposed, and here we are. So the whole timeline here is actually to overwhelm you with the fact that interdisciplinary science takes time, and it's the product of many brilliant minds coming together, and Rome wasn't built in one day. And in my opinion, I think this timeline can be boiled down to these elements that led to this octopus study, that we need a good understanding of fundamental science and taxonomy to allow us to pinpoint that octopus is an ideal species to test for waste collapse, which efforts have really been boosted by cruises and international efforts to explore marine life in Antarctica. We also relied on over 3 decades of long-term sample storage in museums and research collections that protected them for tomorrow's technology. So even though when they were first collected, the idea of using their DNA to understand waste collapse and global sea level rise didn't quite solidify, those researchers knew that they were irreplaceable and they have a long-term significance. We really treasure them with their willingness to share and collaborate. And without museum collections, this study wouldn't be possible. And finally, we should really celebrate that this study was a success of international collaborations and clear communications between disciplines. And without all these elements locked in, we wouldn't be able to understand the sensitivity of waste during the last interglacial and today, and how to better plan for the impending sea level rise under the current climate change. I think we've learned a great deal about the evolutionary persistence of Southern Ocean benthic invertebrates in terms of the power to answer questions that the world cares about. And at the same time, I'm also realizing that we know very little about the ecology and evolution of Southern Ocean animals and the Antarctic ice sheet history. So there's only around 15 Antarctic benthic invertebrate species that have been examined at a genomic level to this day. It's just to illustrate that Antarctic genomic research is still many years behind from other parts of the world, and we need a lot more investment in this field. We also need to keep exploring Antarctica with dedicated scientific expeditions, and we need samples from all around Antarctica to do circumpolar science, and we need to keep them safe in places like museums. And I learned that an open mind goes a long way to let us get creative and think about how to resolve a 50-year waste collapse mystery from a fresh angle. And this is what interdisciplinary science and international collaborations are about. And finally, the legacy of and the impact of the last International Polar Year and the census of Antarctic marine life have really dotted throughout this talk. They're really important campaigns, and I really look forward to the next IPY and how it can help us to answer big questions. And I'm sure there's still so much potential of using these thousands of different Antarctic benthic invertebrate species and genetics to answer many questions about Antarctica's past. We also begin to learn that not just marine invertebrates, but other animals like penguins, mosses, terrestrial invertebrates in Antarctica, they're also an amazing proxy for understanding modern and paleoclimate. So I do encourage you all to read this paper. So this is just the beginning. There's still so much we can do and learn, especially using tomorrow's genomic techniques to understand the sensitivity of Antarctica to temperature changes. And right now, I'm particularly interested in exploring the past history of the Wilkes and Aurora subglacial basins and what happened to them during the last interglacial using animal genomics. So watch this space. And there's always room for more collaboration. So if you have samples that would be useful or an opportunity to collect some more from this area or other parts of Antarctica, be very, very keen to chat. So this case study presented here was a true interdisciplinary study using biology to answer geoscience questions unresolved for nearly 50 years. So Tim, Nick, Nerd, and Jan, they are the geology and biology brains behind this project. I just do the talking. And if you're interested in listening how the octopus study can actually be applied in geoscience, I do encourage you to check out Nick Gollich's talk on Friday morning. And the reason why I'm here today is also because of other collaborators too who have supported us along the way from institutes around the world over the years. And our octopus ice sheet study received fundings and support from many, many sources and countries, including SCAR, that made our work happen. And finally, if you're interested in what we do in our broader program, Securing Antarctica's Environmental Future, please do look up this QR code for our update. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sally. That was great. Hi, my name is Svenja Halfterm. I'm leading the very short question session. So, yeah, feel free to ask a question. I can probably start with, so you want more samples in particular of octopus or all invertebrates or community, or what exactly kind of samples do people deliver to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I love octopus as a personal favorite, but we're constantly working on building other species from Antarctica up as ideal species to test for different environmental questions, so any samples would be great.
You know what to do. Anybody else? I can't actually see you because it's very bright here in brown. You look very nice, just in the dark. Anybody? Arms high up, please, otherwise I can't see. Right. Well, it was too good, I guess. People have no questions. That is unlikely. Oh, I see an arm. I see a hand. Over there. Thank you. There's over there. Yeah, nice.
Thank you, Sally. That was an amazing talk. I was just wondering about the subglacial basins in East Antarctica, and if you have thoughts on what you would target to really test the hypotheses there.
Thank you for the question. If I tell you now, I have to kill you. But maybe in a few years' time we can talk about it, or maybe during a coffee break afterwards.
I'd also like to thank Sally for that great talk, and I think it's been a great explanation and an example of how understanding what's happening in the geology, the glaciology, the biology, the genetics, the taxonomy is all important to understand what's happening in Antarctica and how that's important for the rest of the world. So again, I really encourage you to spend this week learning about other topics and broadening your expertise, and don't be afraid to talk to people and tell them about your science, and try to understand other areas of science so you can see how that applies to your research. We have to finish now, so I'm sure there are probably lots of you who would like to ask Sally additional questions. Please go up to her, as she has said, if you have any collections, or if you'd like to talk to her about her research more, share some collections with her, or invite her to go on a cruise to Antarctica to find some more octopus. or several cruises to go and find octopi. We now have a short break. We're going to come back in 15 minutes for the ComNat SCAR session, but you have a little bit of time to stretch your legs, move around a little bit, but don't go too far, because we do want everyone to be back here in 15 minutes for the next session, the symposium. So please join me in thanking Sally again for her talk, and a great start to the session. Well done, Sally. You did great. Now,
They Hello, everyone. If people can start making their way back to the seats, we're starting the session in 1 minute. Thank you. Hello. Buenos dias, everyone. Good morning. And thank you all for attending the first mini symposium of the Open Science Conference, which is jointly presented by COMNAP and SCAR. COMNAP being the Council of Managers of National Antarctic Programs. I'm Michelle Finneymoore, the Executive Secretary of COMNAP, and our delegates have just spent last week in their meeting in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So it's a huge gathering of Antarctic expertise here in South America. For this session, I'll turn you over to the conveners, Professor Antonio Quesada, the COMNAP Chair, and Professor Deneb Kerenc, SCAR Vice President for Science. Antonio.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Buenos días a todo el mundo. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros tan pronto por la mañana. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for being here so early in the morning. And thank you for attending this mini symposium at the start of the Open Science Conference. It's a pleasure for us for COMNAP to be here this morning. Scheduling this mini symposium at the very beginning of the OSC, the Open Science Conference, it was in purpose because we were celebrating just last week, finishing on Friday, our annual general meeting of COMNAP. As Michelle said, COMNAP is the Council of Managers of National Antarctic Programs. So the guys that they are doing your operations. So this took place last week in Buenos Aires. So many of you that are here are coming from Buenos Aires directly. So we thought that it was an excellent opportunity to be able of discussing between science and operations in this mini symposium. So thank you very much for being here, and we hope that it's going to be fruitful. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm, as Michelle said, I'm Deneb Kerenc. I'm the U.S. delegate to SCAR, and I'm also the SCAR Vice President for Science. And I would also like to welcome all of you and thank you for coming to this mini symposium. SCAR was actually started back in 1958 as an outcome of the International Geophysical Year. And at that time, there were 12 countries that were doing research in Antarctica, and they recognized that it was really important to have international collaboration in order to work in such a remote area. And so for the last 65 years, SCAR has been involved in facilitating international research and also in helping to identify what the really big new questions are in Antarctic science. And of course, that can't be done without the logistical support from the national Antarctic programs. And so COMNAP was formed in 1988, and since then, SCAR and COMNAP have actually worked fairly closely together to try to coordinate the actual research that gets done in the Antarctic. And I'd like to thank Sally for her talk this morning, because she really highlighted the way that international science can be very important in terms of circumpolar research and looking at things around the continent and in the Southern Ocean. And today we're going to hear from a number of initiatives and programs that are doing work of a circumpolar nature, and they're going to talk about how that science is conducted, why that science is being done, and how the interface with COMNAP is important in terms of getting the support that's needed to conduct research around the continent. We are going to have everyone give their presentation, and then afterwards we have two other panelists who are going to make comments, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. So we're hoping that you have brought a lot of questions with you, and that these talks are going to generate more questions, and you're going to learn at least something about what it's like to coordinate international research in a circumpolar environment. So our first speaker is Anjit Botias she's a director of the Alfred Wegener Institute, and she's going to talk about InSync.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Good morning, everyone. And yeah, I would also like to refer to Sally's presentation from this morning. If an octopod can work circumpolar and can work both ice sheets and climate change, why can't we? And that's why we present to you today the idea about driving international science and infrastructure for synchronous observation forward. We call it short Antarctica InSync, and no, it is not the name chosen because I'm a fan of a boy group. It just means it has to do with synchronization of our work, working together, syncing our science. So of course, scientists have big dreams, how they can collaborate for the better of science. And we have the SCAR leadership, and I would like to start out with that one, with deep processes that are special for thinking about Antarctica and the surrounding ocean, the horizon scan, then also strategic plans, then also with other associations, the Ocean Action Plan. So really getting science together across all disciplines, including also social sciences for the question of the policy matters that where science and how can science be good for that. That is critical for us to work together for the biggest and largest questions that we need to answer. And boy, are they big. You have heard some examples of this morning's presentations. Sea ice collapses, ice sheets melting faster, getting lost due to various processes that we cannot map so well, but then also fantastic new observations like whales coming back, the big ones, and so many changes at one time. And of course, it is important to take all those big scientific questions and find out how can we answer them, and how can it not be possible to really do it in a synchronous and pan-Antarctic way. And more than other oceans, we have science facilitation in Antarctica. We have COMNAP, and when you think about it, there is no other ocean where you have science facilitators and operators that know at all times what stations, what ships, what planes, what instrumentation is out there. So bringing those together, that's the purpose not only of this mini-symposium, but also of why we believe we can, with the UN decade, but much more than for the ocean, create a program that helps answering these big questions where synchronous science and pan-Antarctic really matters. Now, we have already presented such an idea in 23. There are already many working groups that think pan-Antarctic and that think synchronicity and that think alignment of measurements of data. And so hearing those from various disciplines, we came forward with the idea to the UN Decade, can there not be a special regional program for Antarctica and the Southern Ocean across land and ice and the ocean and our life, that we form working groups and they all work together and they will have those big scale questions and the infrastructure and the field work and the modeling and data work together before the end of the UN Ocean Decade. That's a big ambition because such a mission has not been there yet for Antarctica. Some fields are leading it. For example, rings that you will hear about in a moment is already right in the middle of such an idea. Working together, Antarctic can help answering big questions no one could tackle alone. We've made ourselves a challenging time plan. We wanted, after we were supported by UNESCO to really bring that idea forward and to have it endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade, we went to ATCM and COMNAP and also other, SCAMELA, but also we're in deep negotiations with SCA, and how can we align this to contribute to the SCA DCC, and you will hear about this in a moment. So we would like to prepare with all of you and all of the partners for by 24 to 26 in the preparatory phase an idea how to realize these big ideas, and then have a field phase from 27 to 23, where 23 is then really the outcome that feeds directly into the International Polar Year. For this idea about the International Polar Year that we all want to prepare, that is planned for 32 and 33, we need some exercises, some milestones that get us into this mode of collaborating bigger and better and furthering, for example, big items on the wish list of SCA and COMNAP, like more inclusivity, more diversity, more people included in polar sciences because they matter to everyone on the planet, and also more sustainable science. And so we're happy that IASC and SCA have chosen Antarctica InSync as a milestone towards the International Polar Year. But what is it actually, and where are we with the preparatory phase? I would like to say a few words about the international partnership foremost, and I'm quite happy to show you this overview of countries, institutions, and scientific program and logistics directors that have already said, well, let's keep in touch, let's form an international steering committee to help our scientists form national committees and bring the ideas for the science plan forward. You don't have to write down those institutions or names, it's just that you can look out, is your country there, is your institution there, and we are discussing all the time with more countries, more institutions. We all have a different way we structure polar research, but we're looking for those people who have an access to the scientists, to the science plans, to the infrastructure programming, and to the funding agencies. And in most countries, there are a couple of people that serve exactly that role, like I do for Germany. So we would like to bring them together, and we have already in an international steering committee, and then we go from there and plan national committees, so scientists and Arctic and ocean scientists from all disciplines that are willing to lead their community to plan with the national program funding the time period 27 to 30. Then the role of COMNAP. It's of course a privilege having an organized, as I said, operator council, and they can look after the ships and planes and all of those systems. They can plan traverses. So always think, when you think about it, where's my role, what could I can do, that we are really meaning the full systemic integration. So yes, also atmospheric scientists, yes, deep sea ecologists, so we think everyone included, and once we have an outline and a forward planning procedure, we can hopefully make room for everyone. Because there is more than just the national operated ships and planes and stations. There is a new idea, new partners coming in supporting even more. To give you some examples, some of these new partners that I have already said they might be able to help is, for example, the tall ship community, the sailing, the race sailing community. It's the community calling themselves the Pink Flamingos, philanthropists with large ships. Okay, they are not really icebreakers, but they can help doing work in summertime. They're equipped with deep robotics, and they can, as a platform, even as a small sailing boat platform, allow a scientist to come on board with our sensor packages, with drones, with new technologies, and help scaling up what we need to know. There are opportunities to bring in more people that are not directly born or present in a system where there is a lot of polar infrastructure. And let me mention to you, and you will hear more about this during SCAR, the EU program Polarine that Nicole Bibo, who is here, represents. It's a way of collaborating so that any berth, any censored time on an observatory can be offered to those who want to connect. And that goes even beyond, as I said, the countries that have already large polar infrastructure. It's an offer to bring in more people and to make sure that we, as a polar community, do exactly what we want to do, being more inclusive. Now, where are the scientists now? What are scientific ideas? I will end in a moment by just throwing in some ideas that are already on the table from some scientists. Note that we are building a website right now, and you can register for more information or for just submitting ideas. And then with the help of the International Committee, we will sort through these ideas, forming scientific working groups. We have enabled by the SCAR coordinated horizon scan and the Southern Ocean Action Plan, we went through the themes that require big synchronous initiatives, and we've grouped them into 5 big themes, and I'm sure you will all recognize them. So these big themes stand for a time of incredible dynamics in Antarctica and the Southern Ocean, but they all root deep into the history of Antarctica so that we can fully emerge so paleoscientists as well as scientists of the present and the future, including also modeling capacities and prediction capacities. So just a few examples of working groups that are currently meeting already to come forward with big ideas. And they need you, they need people. The one, of course, very logical idea is to fix the heat and carbon dynamics. There have been fantastic papers out in the recent years where scientists have shown that the different ways we measure carbon fluxes leads to huge uncertainties how big a sink the Southern Ocean really is. If we stack up on buoys, on floats, on gliders, if we do classical oceanographical transects, we can fix that budget. And as we've heard about predicting better sea level rise, fixing knowledge about how big is the Southern Ocean carbon sink is essential for society when we're planning with our CO2 footprints and with CO2 margins. Another example, think animals that carry sensors for us. This is a revolution, a transformation in oceanography and in chemistry and in biology that actually the animals themselves with some tags and biologgers are leading the way to their preferred niche and habitat, telling us why, under what circumstances they decide to breed or to feed or to meet each other or to communicate. It has been a true revolution, and if we bring those communities together and if they double or triple the amounts of sensors and tags and loggers they can put, we will have a much better understanding in these changing times when we potentially look at further collapses of sea ice. Then coming back, and sorry that I chose a few biological examples, but I was so inspired by collaborations and discussions of the last few days. Just think the idea that is discussed by Kamala, we need at a time when we all have anecdotes from giant pods of fin whales. I was witnessing one of 300, 400 fin whales. Others have recently seen 1,000 fin whales at a time. It looks like some of the large whales are coming back and they're meeting a time of uncertainty. What is with the krill standing stocks? We probably increase krill fisheries. We don't know where they are. We don't know what collapsing sea ice means to krill. But whale and krill interaction, have we planned enough of that? No. So there will be a working group, and there is contribution by SCAR, by Kamala, and others that will plan missions, and we have already 3 outlined that will happen, where we do exactly that, trying to understand what's going on. Then, coming back to the idea of benthic ecology, and what do we know about benthic life? Their history, what do they tell us about change? Here you see on the left side a map of all of the benthic samples that we have from shallow areas to the deep sea, and you see giant holes in our understanding of what life is where and why. And whenever we get cameras down there to the seafloor, we find new amazing stories. I mean, we all have heard the octopod story. We know about the giant isopods or the isotope evolutionary questions. You have seen the ice fish stories, 40 million fish breeding at one time in one area, apparently triggered by a degree change in water temperature. The sponge gardens. So we have so many stories about life to share with the public, and we should fix the holes and gaps that we have. another working group, and we will discuss further about that, is can we not fix the absence of a circumpolar microbiome and eDNA survey? If we have all of those platforms and we just need to filter water, we could do that in the 2 years ahead. So see, it's just a short glimpse on ideas, but the idea is that we learn how to collaborate even more using the existing facilitation by SCAR and COMNAP, and thereby contributing big time on behalf of Antarctica and the Southern Ocean to the UN Decade. The UN Decade has its missions and goals, you can look it up, and ours that we have as a SCAR community fit exactly their goals. We want to connect society to this ocean that is the heart, the lung, and potentially the brain of all oceans on Earth. And with that, I'll end, and I'll ask you to check out our website in progress. It's just the beginning. It's under construction. We are currently building a coordination team at AVI and elsewhere. And note that we'll have an extended mini symposium on Thursday, 11:30 to 1 o'clock. It's really a workshop, so you all are welcome to come in and help us discussing ideas, because we want to pin down all of those ideas and have this wish come true, a mission to Antarctica. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antia. Now, our next course in the menu of this morning is Kenny Matsuoka and John Gouldal from the Ring projects. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure for RING's project to present our project and share the lessons we have learned in the past several years. Okay. This is a joint contribution between myself and Jan Guido here. I'm representing the SCAR Action Group Antarctic Rings, and he represents COMNAP Rings Collaboration Project. This project directly contributes to the sea level rise prediction in the future, and in that sense, we work very closely to Instant, and we do more field surveys, and they do more overall research, and we help each other. Let me start this slide showing how much sea level will rise by the end of this century. And I show the two cases from IPCC's latest assessment report. The left side showing the low emission case, that makes a sea level rise by 43 centimeters, and the right side showing the high emission case, giving a little bit more sea level rise. And the pie chart showing where sea level contribution comes from, and Antarctica contribute about 16 to 25% depending on the emission scenario. So in this way, Antarctica is just one of the major contributors, but when we see uncertainty, we have quite a different picture. These estimates based on the ensemble experiment, so there is a lot of a range of uncertainty, and if we take ensemble variability as uncertainty, Antarctica really dominated the uncertainty. So in other words, if we want to precisely know our future, we really need to work in Antarctica. And in the context of this kind of research for coming centuries, Antarctic coastal region, ice sheet margin, is much more important than the inland region. And this calculation is done by models, and the model depend on the data, of course, and the key data is bed topography. Even though model are perfect, well, I know it's not perfect, but even though it is perfect, if bed topography is wrong, the result would be wrong, cannot be correct. So bed topography is critically important knowledge to predict the future. Now, for this purpose, there is a 5 decades of international effort to develop a bed topography, and I would like to show these 4 maps showing that how British Antarctic Survey contributed to improve and contribute and also integrate the knowledge from international research community. The left top showing the knowledge by 2000, that was bed map 1, and in the last 2 decades, the incremental knowledge improvement is shown there, and right bottom in blue, it shows the latest knowledge. And this kind of research is really started in late 1960s and the beginning of 1970s, and this book by Drury is really interesting and fun to read. However, I'm afraid that I'm showing the map that may mislead you, because Antarctica is 5,000 kilometers by 5,000 kilometers by 5,000 kilometers. It's huge. And if we see data coverage in this scale in small map, we believe that, wow, done. Why do we need to work more? But if we see the details, there are a lot of data gaps. So RINGS action group analyzed Bedmap 3 latest FAIR data set to see where the data gap in the coastal region of the Antarctic ice sheet. And here you can see 8 pie chart showing the data availability in 8 different regions around Antarctica. I would like to draw your special attention to 2 o'clock in this map, where NW land. That is the biggest data gap. There, only, I cannot read it, 5% of the grounding line has radar data, bed elevation data within 1 kilometers. And nearly 3/4 of the grounding line has no data within 5 kilometers. And even if we look Amundsen Bay, say 8 o'clock in this map, data availability is not enough. So in other words, it is very clear we really need to work circum-Antarctic, every region in Antarctica. And the left histogram shows Antarctic picture. You can see that nearly 20% of the grounding line has no data within 20 kilometers, and that is really bad. As an analog of Antarctic ice sheet margin bed topography, I would like to show the beautiful picture of Tromsø, our hometown. I took this picture from the top of the cable car, and you can see the mountains far behind. That is about 10 kilometers away, and they are about 1,000 meters high. This mountain, I'm taking the picture, is 400 meters high above the sea level, and my institute is on the island down there, 400 meters below. So that means if we have a single data point within 10 kilometers, we do not show any bed elevation changes in this scale, and you can clearly see that how it hampers our estimate of the future changes. I hope I made a strong case to show that bed topography measurement along the ice sheet margin is critically important. That's why we started Project RINGS. RINGS doesn't stand for the long project name. This just stands for the shape of the surveys we would like to make. So I would like to emphasize the project is rings plural rather than a ring, because we'd like to make circumpolar surveys at least 3 times. And the most important one is at the grounding line that we call primary ring. Grounding line is a location where the grounded ice sheet starts to afloat as an ice shelf, and the topography there is important to know flux gate, how much ice is discharged right now. And also, the bed topography several tens of kilometers inland of the current grounding line is also very important, because that would be the future grounding line location. And also, we would like to make a survey around the seaward ring above ice shelves, because seabed there is critically important to know how ocean will eat the ice in the coming centuries. So we'd like to make at least these 3 rings, primary, landward, and seaward rings, using small survey airplane. We put a deep sounding radar and gravimeter for topography, and also we want to put a shallow sounding radar, microwave radar for surface mass balance, and the magnetometer, LiDAR, and the camera, and so on, and even ocean sensors that can be deployed from the airplane. So I would like to say that RINGS really started as an idea to survey bed topography, but we can use the platform, share the platform for multidisciplinary science. When we started RINGS Action Group back in 2021 during the pandemic, we started with 30 people. And in the last 3 years, we have doubled the membership, and as of yesterday, we have 94 members. And I'm very sorry if the logo is missing from your institution, but the membership is individual, and I show the logo of their member institutions. You can see that I'm getting more trouble to put a new logos here, but I hope I can do the better job soon. And the membership is open, and I'm very much happy to hear your interest to join the RINGS Action Group. Let me show how RINGS idea is being developed in the recent years, but I'm not saying that we are the owner of the idea. As far as I know, the idea of RINGS, network of airborne surveys for science and transportation together, was discussed in 1968 during the ATCM expert meeting for logistics held in Tokyo. I was not born at that time, so I have no chance to claim the ownership of the idea, obviously. But we really developed the idea recently because other data, say satellite data and computational models are really developed. And we are critically needed to take the better topography data more. So we told this story to the AGU's EOS magazine as a showcase. And also we published the RINGS white paper to make this point very clearly. And we really enjoyed the first RINGS workshop back in 2022, just after Corona pandemic. As you can see here, this meeting has a lot of early career scientists. Actually, more than half of the participants are early career scientists. And you can see high diversity in expertise, gender, geography, and so on. And it's really the great cook part to develop the idea. When we started RINGS back in 2021, we really focused on better topography. But through this workshop, we decided that we can contribute much more than just better topography. So we started a group effort to analyze published results, to quantify data gap and strengthen scientific rationale, and these results would be presented in another symposium on Thursday this week. So science base has been developed, but we need to make it happen as a survey, and the RINGS Action Group has no budget or no resources to make the survey by ourselves. So the role of Action Group is really facilitate international collaboration. The starting point idea we had is to send airplanes 3 times all around Antarctica. But you can see this is extremely difficult, at least, and probably not really practical. So we decided to make multiple regional effort in a coordinated way so that no data gap would be left. And all data collected in a similar way so we can easily compile regional result to the circum-Antarctic result. To make it happen, we started with NW land, the biggest fish, the biggest data gap. And we developed this white paper as a joint effort between scientists and logistics. This white paper started with the scientific rationale, but we emphasized available resources in the region and find out preliminary survey plans and required resources. In this way, we easily and probably straightforwardly transferred from science knowledge to the action plan. Last year, June 2023, we have a fortune to present the RINGS project, or lessons learned from past airborne geophysical surveys for RINGS at the Common Up Antarctic Innovation and Collaboration Symposium. At that time, we received a lot of support from Common Up delegate, and that's the starting point to have the Common Up RINGS collaboration project that Jan Gudo is leading now. And for this effort, Australian Antarctic Vision and Rob Clifton really helped as the chair of the science facilitation group, and I cannot acknowledge more than I can. Okay, let me show the leadership. There is 94 members right now, and these 8 members are on the steering committee for Antarctic RINGS Action Group. So this is their science side. And for the Common Up RINGS collaboration project, Jan Gudo and Gen Hashida are leading it. And also we have the Apex rep for the RINGS Action Group. International collaboration at this scale is extremely difficult because everyone has different common sense, frankly speaking. And during the RINGS workshop back in 2022, some early career researchers are brave enough to speak up that to share their painful experience in the past, that we do not see it again. But actually, it can happen anytime in our project as well. So that's a starting point to work with shared values and guiding principles that we finalized last December. And you can access this document through this QR code, and I will discuss more about this on Thursday. But this is really important for us to have such a shared values together. I admit that everyone has a different understanding about this, and I'm still working to do the better job. But as a group, we have these shared values as a starting point, and that helps us quite a lot. As I mentioned, RINGS Action Group do not make any surveys by ourselves, rather facilitate collaboration. So to do this, we have the mechanism to endorse individual project. So to get your project rings endorsed, of course, we would like to see scientific relevance, of course, but also you need to commit to uphold rings shared value and the guiding principles, and also commit to share geographical information of your project so that we have a better chance to seek international collaboration. And we are very strict to share the data openly at the end. And we have a long discussion how soon we can release the data. And at the end, we agreed that the embargo should be less than 2 years. Personally, I feel it is too long, but this is what we can agree. And we encourage all projects to share the data much, much faster. And so far, we started this links endorsement process early this year. And so far, 8 projects were endorsed. And the 4 projects are still pending. So pending project or proposal can be endorsed as well. But I cannot tell you about such project publicly. But we are very happy that we have 4 projects already endorsed, and that is working very well. This map showing how little we know about the bed topography. Sorry, I forgot to put a color bar, but the yellow part showing that, say, end of around 2 o'clock, show that the bed elevation certainty exceed easily 400 to 600 meters. And as the color gets darker, we have a better knowledge. That is the result of Dr. Calvin Shackleton. He will present it on Thursday. But as you can see here, there are a lot of data gaps, big and small, all around Antarctica. And we really need international coordinated effort to fill them all in coming years. One of the endorsed project is drawing model and end-of-land rings. That is already working. And last season, we made the first surveys, and we took a lot of lessons. And in the coming season, the last year, we also work with NISA Antarctica. That's a project by Eric Rino of University of California, Irvine. And originally, he only planned for the ground-based surveys, but we found that, well, we do airborne surveys, and he's doing the ground surveys. We decided to work together. That is actually a great example to expand the international collaboration. And in the coming season, more ambitious project is going to happen. That is led by Professor Lene Forsberg of Technical University Denmark. His project, Sweden Rings, going around all Antarctica, excluding some most difficult regions as a starting point to have circumpolar data and focus on several glaciers to get more data. Another project, Keynote, led by Dr. Won-San Lee of Korea Polar Research Institute, working on the most changing regions in Antarctica. He's using not only airplane, but better on the ground survey. So it's really multidisciplinary, large project. And we share the goal of the project quite well. In this way, we're going to develop regional effort. And then that is really learning processes. We are still changing our working model year by year to have the best possible way to do it. And I very much appreciate any feedback and suggestions to us. This year, we particularly focus on developing peninsular regional effort. And then we had the workshop yesterday for scientific purpose. It was well attended. And we have discussed this idea throughout the week, last week in Buenos Aires for Common Up AGM. Among many nations, Chile showed very strong interest and support, and I very much appreciate, and we'd like to hear such passions from many nations in the coming years. I would like to end my talk by showing this animation. Nothing is shown there. I hope it works. Maybe, excuse me, I need help. Good. Yes, it's popped up. I made this one for the Common Up workshop last year based on my personal surveys with successful airborne geophysical scientists, what is needed to have successful missions. Some of the lessons or some of the important factors is, say, project-specific instrument, high-performance instrument, weather luck, plan B, you can see a lot of things. I think it is important to define the science priority very clearly and stick with it while we are being very flexible. Anything can happen in Antarctica. But we want to reach the goal as early as possible. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Kenny. The next presenter is going to be Vonda Cummings, and she's going to talk about ANTOS.
Thanks, Deneb. So I'm Vonda Cummings. I'm a co-chair of ANTOS, and ANTOS stands for Antarctic Nearshore and Terrestrial Observation Systems. So we're a SCAR Life Sciences expert group. We started out as an action group in 2014, and we also receive support from physical and geological sciences as well. This is the ANTOS Science Steering Committee. There are actually a lot of the people on the steering committee here this week, so if you want to know more about ANTOS, please talk to them. I want to acknowledge my co-chair, Craig Carey, who sadly passed away back in February. He was extremely passionate about Antarctica and particularly about what ANTOS was trying to do. So the reasoning behind ANTOS is that there's just fundamental data that we lack across Antarctic ecosystems, and we really need to know what the environmental factors and their interactions are that are driving biological diversity and community composition. There's also a lot that we don't know about Antarctic biological diversity across multiple scales. There is also a real lack of long-term matched biological and environmental data sets so that we can attribute particular changes or responses in biology to environmental conditions and how they change. And also there is a huge gap and a real lack of consistent data sets that we can compare across the Antarctic and across different scales and space and time. So what is ANTOS? ANTOS is a biologically focused initiative to help us assess response to environmental variability and change. It's a long-term commitment and stressing the long term to be able to get that basic information on environmental parameters that are relevant to the biology, to be able to detect or underpin what the changes and the trends that we're seeing. While ANTOS is a SCAR expert group, it's also relevant to lots of the science research programs. Our idea was that it would transcend short-term funding, so it would have a long-term vision, yet it would still be crucial for informing management and conservation type approaches. And it's a big thing, like some of the things that we've heard about this morning. It's like cross-continental and cross-national scale. So our goals were to establish an observation network of representative sites around the Antarctic and the sub-Antarctic, in the near shore and in the terrestrial systems. And we wanted a system-wide approach. We wanted to use consistent methodology so that everything would be comparable. We wanted to measure things long-term so that we could see how things were changing over time. We wanted everything to be tiered so that it was accessible to people no matter how much money they had or they didn't have. And ultimately it needs to be able to underpin good science and assist evidence-based management and conservation. So I mentioned a tiered observation network. We essentially have like a basic network which doesn't cost a lot of money, doesn't require a lot of scientific expertise, through to an advanced one which is more scientifically complex and more expensive. So for example, at the basic system you might get really basic information on environmental parameters that are expected to change, and at the advanced one you're more likely to be able to tease apart the mechanisms behind the changes that we're seeing. So this is an example of the tiered systems that we developed for terrestrial environments. And you don't need to look so much at the detail, just that they get more complex and more measurements are made as you move up the tiers. And it gives us more information as we move up the tiers, and it also costs a lot more to implement. So this is an image of an intermediate terrestrial system which has been deployed at Cape Adare. So this is measuring light, relative humidity, temperature and moisture in the soil at a few different depths. It measures wind, photosynthetically available radiation, and importantly, the data from these systems are real-time telemetred back to a database. Here's an example of a kind of a hybrid basic intermediate marine system. So this is measuring also photosynthetically available radiation, temperature, conductivity, chlorophyll. Some of them are also measuring currents. We have permanent transects deployed on the seafloor that we can go back to and visit time after time. And also some of them deploy these, the little inset on the left-hand side of the image there. This is a system that's used all around the world actually to look at colonization of organisms over time. And here's another example of the basic intermediate system which you can deploy remotely and retrieve remotely. So what has ANTOS achieved? We've done some online surveys where we tried to identify what existing long-term monitoring is going on around the Antarctic, and also to identify new sites of scientific interest. So this just shows the contribution to that survey of the different nations. So we had 21 different nations contribute information to that. We were able to use this to figure out where monitoring had been conducted and for how long. So this plot shows the locations of monitoring at the moment around the Antarctic. And the bigger the circle, the longer the monitoring has been conducted for. It's pretty clear to see that, that the monitoring is focused on where bases are, not surprisingly, but that there are huge gaps in knowledge from lots of parts of the Antarctic that are not visited. And we've also used this information to help recommend areas that we think would be awesome for deploying these ANTOS nodes long term. And if you want to know more about the results of the survey, then Abigail is giving a poster presentation on Thursday evening, so go along and have a look at that. The other thing that we have done, which is really impressive, is created a database. So this is a place where the data that we collect can be telemetered to or deposited in, and there's a website that goes along with that. And that has been hosted and managed and developed by COPRI. We've designed adaptable sensor platforms. So essentially, if you decide that you want to do a tier 2 terrestrial network, you can contact Hoskin Scientific in Canada, and they will give you the sensors and everything that you need, and then you can just purchase that and then go and deploy it yourself. And it also comes with advice on how to set it up. What we've also been able to do is to trial some of these systems. So we've done that in 2 terrestrial and 4 marine locations in the Ross Sea region. And we have planned sites that the Australian Antarctic Division will put in place in next year and also the year after. We're developing at the moment protocols for baseline surveys. So this, even though I've talked a lot about measuring environmental factors, the whole premise of ANTOS is to understand biological change. So if you are potentially measuring environmental parameters, you need to do a baseline biodiversity survey. Depending on where you are, there'll be different methods and different processes for doing those surveys. So our protocols will be really helpful for that. We've also produced a couple of papers to the ATCM and also to CAMLR as well about the importance of ANTOS and of long-term monitoring. So the way that we've done this is essentially through our committee and through our individually funded science projects. So the New Zealand deployments, for example, have been funded by particular organisations, so NZARI and the Antarctic Science Platform, and the logistics support has been provided to those projects by Antarctica New Zealand. The Italian deployments have been through PNRA and also the research funding, and the Australian deployments are through the Australian Antarctic Division. COPRI has totally supported the development and the hosting of the database, and Hoskin Scientific in Canada have supported the sensor integration and the manuals. So we haven't had any funding for this, and we've basically just tried to do this as best we could. So when you're trying to develop something like this, particularly something that's circumpolar, there are challenges. And our goals of long-term commitment and being able to transcend individual projects and lifetimes of individual researchers are pretty lofty. So that has been a huge challenge. And particularly because the funding doesn't line up across international projects, and also because national Antarctic programs have different approaches to monitoring. Some of them are very supportive, some of them have other priorities. And getting multiple national programs and funders to support an initiative like this and lining that all up in space and time is a challenge. So perhaps some of the solutions to that are to have some high-level coordination of multiple national programs and funders that could support an initiative like this. Perhaps there are requirements around state of the environment monitoring and around what you have to do when you're setting up MPAs and ASPAs. And I think that something like ANTOS could fit really well into those. And perhaps, we have our methods and everything. So it's just waiting to be put into other research programs and logistics and national program aims. Over the next 2 years, so we have 2 years hopefully to run in ANTOS before it goes to another phase. We're going to complete our baseline biodiversity survey manuals. We're going to refine the tower designs now that we've had some trial and error with Hoskins. There will be new deployments, but one of our most important things that we want to do is ensure that the data that we collect has longevity and persists into the future. Ultimately, what we're going to be spending the next couple of years doing is communicating what we've learned from ANTOS and about the ANTOS framework for doing these kinds of circumpolar things, and ensuring that these are available to other initiatives out there and can be potentially folded into other initiatives, whether it be from science, policy, or management. Thank you.
Thank you, Vonda. For those standing at the back, there are plenty of empty seats in this area here, so please, it's already 1 hour standing, so come over here, sit down, relax. And now I would like to introduce Jennifer Freer and she's going to talk about ICED. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Jennifer Freer. I'm an ecological modeller at the British Antarctic Survey, and I'm here today to present on behalf of the entire ICED team, which is led by Nadine Johnson, Emma Cavan, and Stuart Kearney and the entire steering committee. Yes, I'm going to give a talk that will provide a brief overview of the structure and activities of ICED, which stands for Integrating Climate and Ecosystem Dynamics in the Southern Ocean, and I'll hopefully show how this is another example of how we can conduct circumpolar and international collaboration projects. So what is ICED? ICED began in 2008, and it really was developed to address this urgent need to incorporate research on physical climate change into our understanding of ecosystem change in the Southern Ocean and at the circumpolar scale. And ICE wants to do that by combining data analyses, fieldwork, and modelling approaches. So ICE's vision is quite simple. It's to unite stakeholders to understand the interactions between climate and ecosystem dynamics, to generate scenarios and projections of future ecosystem change, and to support sustainable governance in the context of this changing world. So where does ICE sit within the landscape of other projects and initiatives and lots of different acronyms? Well, here's ICE in the middle here. It's currently a regional project of IMBER, which stands for the Integrated Marine Biosphere Research Project, which sits underneath SCORE. And it's also a co-sponsored program of SCAR. And I think this is a really cool position to be in because it means we can advocate for ecosystem research within SCAR, but we can also talk to people outside of the Antarctic community and advocate for Southern Ocean science at this global platform of IMBER. So we contribute to their research agendas, we support the decision making under the Antarctic Treaty, but we also work with lots of other stakeholders that are listed here to foster collaborations amongst them all. So to achieve the vision, ICE works on 3 research challenges. These are understanding and quantifying the state and variability of Southern Ocean ecosystems, improving scenarios and projections of those ecosystems, and informing conservation and sustainable management of the Southern Ocean ecosystem. It does this by promoting and addressing these challenges through different research activities, but also delivering workshops, conference sessions, and stakeholder engagement activities. And it's important to say here that ICE is made up of a completely voluntary research network, and one of the sort of mode of operations of ICE is to really support and mentor early career researchers to value early career researchers and produce the next generation of Southern Ocean ecosystem scientists. So they give lots of opportunities for ECRs while also providing support for more established scientists. So one of the major accomplishments of ICE so far has been the recent completion of the world's first marine ecosystem assessment of the Southern Ocean, or MESO, and this was expertly led by people Andrew Constable, Jess Melbourne-Thomas, Monica Mulber, and others on the MESO steering committee. And this has been a major work of ICE over the last 5 years or so. MESO really came about by recognizing that the Southern Ocean ecosystems were under pressure, and MESO gathered a huge team of researchers, over 200 researchers from over 19 countries, to conduct a systematic, large-scale assessment of the status and change of Southern Ocean ecosystems using best available scientific evidence. And they really did capture the full spectrum of the ecosystem. They looked at biogeochemistry all the way up to higher predators. They looked at resident and migrant species. They looked at coastal ecosystems all the way to the deep sea. And didn't look at species on their own, but looked at their interactions with each other, with their environment, the functions or processes that these species perform, and the threats that they face. So this came about by it highlighted the need for local and global protection, so local management as well as global mitigation of climate change. So MESO culminated in a Frontiers in Marine Science special edition, but also more recently a summary for policymakers document, which is now published. And I really recommend that you go and look at that online. Not only is it a sort of a one-stop shop for our status of Southern Ocean ecosystems, it's really beautifully put together. There's lots of great graphics and visuals and art in there. Another main focus of ICE has been on Antarctic krill. So we recently conducted a Antarctic krill modelling workshop that was run by an amazing group of early career researchers. And this was really designed to strengthen our connection with SCEG, which is the SCAR krill expert group. And it brought people together to look at how we can better understand krill dynamics, particularly through modelling approaches. So the workshop was such a success that they have wrote a report and submitted papers to CAMLAR But also we had some follow-up sessions at AGU and at the recent Zooplankton Symposium in Hobart last year. And also these same ECRs that run the workshop are now publishing 2 papers on krill dynamics and their interactions with sea ice and recruitment, and that will also be submitted to CAMR. So this has been a really fruitful avenue of research for ICE. And lastly, the last thing to highlight is that ICE has been working alongside lots of different partners to be part of the Southern Ocean Task Force. And one product of this has been this Southern Ocean Action Plan. And this was really instrumental for SCAR's involvement in now the UN Ocean Decade Collaborative Center for the Southern Ocean. And it's also allowed us to have new relationships with other UN Ocean Decade programs like JETSON, which works on the Ocean Twilight Zone, and the projects within that that are polar related, such as Biopol. And lastly, we've also been working with Arctic and Antarctic partners to be part of the interim planning group for the 5th International Polar Year, and have put together this concept note and timeline, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So what's next for ICE? Well, in the short term, we'll be continuing to deliver on a number of these activities that fit within its challenges. So that's continuing to contribute to the UN Ocean Decade, 5th IPY, and hopefully looking for opportunities to build on MISO. We'll also be strengthening those relationships with SCEG and being more ambitious in our modelling development, and continuing to input into Southern Ocean and global scale policies. And lastly is just to say that IMBER Science Plan comes to an end in 2025, so there'll be lots of work for us producing synthesis and legacy products as part of that. More long term, beyond 2025, ICE has lots of aspirational ideas that they'd like to take forward. This includes integrating more biogeochemistry into our work, developing stronger links with physical scientists, and altogether developing a better representation of the Southern Ocean within Earth system models. And from a sustainable governance point of view, we'd really like to see more engagement with social scientists and economics in our research to better sort of show the value of Southern Ocean ecosystems to across the globe. But in saying that, to achieve these aspirations, we need some simple support measures from SCAR, CONMAP, and others. And some highlights here that things that would be really nice to see would be engagement with a more diverse range of nations and disciplines, strengthening collaborations between SCAR programs and groups and with other global initiatives, retaining that ECR talent and investing in them to develop them as the next generation of Southern Ocean ecosystem researchers. And some smaller points that would really help our research go further is to have standardized protocols for observations to enable comparison at that circumpolar scale. And as we've seen today in the plenary talk, more funds and maximizing the potential from historical data would be fantastic. So I'll leave you with this lovely piece of art that was in one of the Summary for Policymakers report from MISO, and don't hesitate to get in touch with anyone from ICE if you'd like to hear more about our work. Thank you.
So thank you very much, and now we get into our panelists. We have 2 different people here. Those are different trajectories, and I think this is very enriching for this audience. We have Marcelo Lepe, former director of INACH, and he has been working long time in science and in administration as well. So he's an old guy that we all know here, and he has a lot of trajectory and expertise behind him. And then we have Doğaç from the Turkish program. This is, I would say, the starting movement of the Turkish program. Turkey is starting their program after 6, 7 years, 8 years now?
Around 8 years, 8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years, and well, we have here the former vice chair of APEX, and we have a young guy here who has been working quite a lot in Antarctica, but it's a different kind of working. So I think that we have a very nice couple of people here, and I would like to pose the first question, if you don't mind, to Doğaç. How do you think is the way of engaging younger people in international collaboration.
All right. So thank you very much for this presentation and for this event as a mini symposium, SCAR and COMNAP in collaborative way. And on my point of view, to be a young scientist or researcher in this community, starting with having an ambitious to the Antarctic research, and also it could be for the Arctic as well. It could be the bipolar. And when the young researchers started the commitment, they decide to have the commitment on Antarctic research, and having an opportunity to join like these meetings could be very nice chance to meet with the new scientists, and then they can gain their visions for the future. I remember my time when I was more younger than this time. The first SCAR meeting was in 2018 that I went in Davos, and I just tried to run around, tried to meet with the people and try to understand even maybe what the posters are. But then coming the years, the helping with the Apex, of course, or all my own national Antarctic program, etc., everything is starting to be much more crystal clear for everybody. So to keep going on working with the international committees, listening from these very successful researchers from all around the community will help all the young generation to be a good scientist or logistics persons in the future.
Thank you, Dash. So my question is now for Marcelo. How do you do it from the administration to engage young people into the international collaboration things? And also thinking about logistics, because many people in the audience are interested mainly in science, but there is also a very important logistics career that is open to the young people, isn't it?
Thank you very much. Of course, I feel in between friends in COMNAP. I have shared so many years the table with some of you. First, I want to go back in one point. You mentioned something really important, and in terms of the first step, we have a big responsibility in the programs to try to communicate about the importance of the work that we are doing. Otherwise, it is impossible to know what our countries are doing in Antarctica. This is the first thing. The second one is provide opportunities to the people. This is something like top-down and bottom-up. Top-down first. You have to educate and convince about the opportunities that are available for the young people. So the best way is probably having these meetings cheaper than in the past. I have to say, I was one claiming all the time that this is very expensive and it's prohibitive for Latin American countries, for young people around the world. And our decision to make this probably the cheapest open science conference in the history is the response because you are here. It's a good way to convince young people to come to these meetings, to put face-to-face with decision makers, not only scientists. You're telling something really important. We need other stage, another part of the chain. The virtual chain has logistics, decision makers, communicators, educators. If you have the 5 parts of the chain, probably we will improve our collaboration, we will improve the participation of young people, but especially we will have a big community committed with the big objectives about our national programs and our joint work in SCAR, COMNAP, and the different institutions part of the Antarctic Treaty.
Thank you, Marcelo. In fact, this is something that is very relevant. I think that getting people involved, not in only one of those 5 legs, but in other things, that is perhaps is interesting, because we need to renew our blood, I would say, in these institutions. Not only in science, that science is normal, because we have PhD students, and this is just coming always the same age and they are passing through. But we need also in the institutional level policy makers, and we need also logistics just to be involved. So what do you think, Doash, that you really need to motivate a young PhD students to participate in APEX, for instance?
Starting with the joining these meetings, also I believe the commitment on the following one project is another issue. I know when the young students are very eager to follow with all the projects at the same time, but I believe the power of the following only one consecutively. That will give you the opportunity to become a professional for your future career, and as well as then you will be able to gain the experiences on how you can manage the problems that you will face in the future. Doing a researching is another issue, but also the doing is on the field is another issue, because in the field you can face with many other problems, and you need to be able to find the solution immediately in just maybe the 5 minutes, and without having any other help, or without having your spare parts or the maintenance equipments that you cannot carry on your maybe backpack. So starting with the APEX or any other international collaborations or any other educational outreach commitments, doesn't matter. First of all, of course, the young generation needs to check all the spares, all the white vision all around, but as soon as possible, my suggestion is to try to be professional on just one area and follow the steps.
Thank you very much. So before passing the floor to the audience, I would like to ask Marcelo to say whatever he wants. 1 minute, only 1 minute, and then I will pass the microphone onto the floor.
No, just a very short thing. It's also, I am always convinced about the importance of this kind of meetings. Again, sorry, I'm not a singer. To be committed with opportunity to have scientists, decision makers, people working in logistics, policy makers, face to face, in a beer garden, in a coffee shop, is something that is impossible to do when you have only virtual meetings. Also, the hybrid format is very confusing. Sometimes working the whole day and sleeping a few hours to have a presentation at 3 a.m. is not very productive, and you don't have the opportunity otherwise to be in contact. This morning I was talking and chatting with two young PhDs, and they mentioned that this was the first opportunity to meet finally the co-tutors of the thesis. So the first time after 6 years. So the importance to be face to face is something that I want to put the accent now. The first day of this meeting, just take advantage, young people, take advantage of the possibility to talk with someone. Don't be shy, do it. It's an opportunity, it's the best way to have a broad picture of what is happening in your particular interest and in your particular field.
Thank you, Marcelo, for that very productive 1.5 minutes. So now we pass the floor to the audience. Is there any question for any of the panelists that would like to ask, to pose? Yes, please. Is the microphone around? I will do it.
Thank you very much to everybody. That was incredibly interesting and really demonstrated the breadth of stuff that's being done in Antarctica. One of the questions I had was for actually all the panelists who talked about long-term projects that they've been doing and established projects, because we have it in sync. which seems to be incredibly ambitious and covering almost everything. Can you please give some advice to the InSync leadership about what you think is useful things to be doing if you're organizing that many people, but also the pitfalls that come from trying to organize projects that have involved multinational cooperation and collaboration and organizing people?
This is yours, Antia.
No, it's not for InSync, it's for the other panels to advise InSync.
Okay.
So if we got it right, the question had to do with if we go to very ambitious multinational, international project meetings, is there risks for other programs compared to long-term? No? Okay, it's so hard to understand here.
What can the other panelists tell InSync to avoid any mistakes or problems? Any help that they can offer in advice on working with that many groups of people?
So perhaps Bonda, you have one of the longer term. So
yeah, I think I got the question. Hello. Sorry. I guess I kind of touched on that in my my final slide, just basically saying that. Okay, sorry. It is very hard to. Funding is a big thing, and it's, as I said, it's very hard to get multinational funding lined up at the same time so that you can do things in a coordinated way. And there must be some solution, but I'm not sure what it is.
I think from ACE, they used to have funding for a dedicated international project office so that they could have dedicated support team, and now they don't have that so much, and that's limited in how effective and widespread they've been able to do. So I guess making sure that there is a dedicated support team to help out the scientists, because they're so busy with so many other things, I would think that would be an important thing to do.
Thank you, Jen. I think we have one more request on the floor. One here and then another there.
Sorry, I took the microphone before we heard the answer to that first question. We heard a lot of ambitious international science programs today and how it comes together with the logistics. But what we didn't hear much about was how we use these initiatives to leverage more than the sum of the parts of the individual programs. And we've got initiatives like Thwaites that have played out that have been really successful in that. So I was interested in some of the reflections from the panelists about how the scientists in the room can use their participation in these international programs to lobby and leverage their own governments and other philanthropic organisations or the like to actually get more.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole, for that question. So I think you can see that from the idea of if you take time or space, if we bring information together, what do we have and where are our gaps in scientific knowledge, we get immediately to the point that not one single country can do that at the size of an ocean or a continent like Antarctica. And so as ANTOS shows where the gaps are in observational, terrestrial and ocean-based points, then when we come together, we can all tackle that. Or if we look at the outcome from modeling exercises, where are the big gaps? Again, if we then have a community that can answer to that together, we just get much more outcome than by individual initiatives. And when you look back in science history, you find examples of where that exactly has helped to make huge leaps in understanding. For us, doing Mosaic in the Arctic, like a year-round drift study with 40 countries and hundreds of people, it was such a leap jump, and it was the same principle. Everyone brings their funding together and their national capacities and the young people. I come from an era of Census of Marine Life. I don't know if some of you remember this. It was just a little bit of seed money and coordination. The rest was done by national programs. It has completely revolutionized the data we have about marine life. So sometimes it's that time when we come together and all work as one if it works out, and then we take big leaps, and that's important for the next generation as well. But I'm an optimist, as you've probably heard from what I just said.
Thank you, Antia. We have one more person there, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we heard a lot about like different amazing science programs, and also about how to communicate and kind of like encourage the new and younger generation. I thought Kenny showed an amazing example of leadership, also in terms of standing up for inclusion and what it means, and that being a learning process. And I did want to ask kind of the panel, everyone, you know, how do we contest some of the barriers that we know that exist and the old school established thinking, because all of these amazing impactful projects are made by people, and we need to support a culture that is actually safe and embracing for all. Thank you.
Well, hello? Yeah, it's a quite difficult thing, and as I said, that we keep learning. But I think it's most important thing is that everyone stay open-minded and share the lessons, and we accept people who have made the mistakes. I think that's made a huge difference, and we do that, then we have more opportunities to learn, and then I feel that this attitude is in the RINGS community, and then that is a great potential.
So when we were at COMNAP, the representative from South Africa also mentioned in polar, and especially Antarctica, due to what it means to all of the world, we have to also think deeper when it comes to inclusivity, diversity, to those countries and nations that are completely cut off, to have people, citizens, that have the chance to go and see for themselves, measure for themselves. It may sound completely old-fashioned to think that you really have to go for yourself, see for yourself, measure for yourself to understand as a country, but in fact, because it's all about national governance, if you have no scientist who is an eyewitness of change in polar system, it matters to the country and national decision-taking. So another big question is, how can we do that? How can we open up programs, infrastructures, to bring in people for whom the future of ice sheet melt matters in their home country, and they don't have a single bit of polar education, polar infrastructure, polar science? That's a big challenge that I take very seriously, and I'm happy if there are people who think about that too. I think that's a trick we'll have to play for the future, for a safe future.
Any other panelists want to comment on that issue? Okay, well, I would like to thank all of the panelists for joining us today. I think you heard a pretty wide range of issues about science and logistics in terms of circumpolar initiatives, from new programs all the way through established programs. You now know who all these people are, so during the week you can find them if you have anything else you'd like to ask or discuss with them. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming. And now you really get a coffee break before the session starts. So thanks very much.